The temperature is starting to drop outside, and so are some players' fantasy values right now. But first, let's talk about the guys whose values you shouldn't be worried about. They might have had bad games in Week 11, but they should be fine. Starting with Jonathan Taylor. Great game last week, bad game this week. It is what it is. Move on. And same with Derrick Henry. Yes, he scored, but he also fumbled and didn't have a huge yardage game for the second week in a row. But look, this guy has been unbelievable all season long. We're giving Derrick Henry a pass here. And Bijan's streak of going over 100 scrimmage yards came to an end this week, but seriously, we're not panicking on Bijan Robinson, right? And nor are we panicking on Lamar Jackson after one not so great game. It happens. This guy has been unbelievable all year long. Just keep starting Lamar Jackson. And of course, Drake London did not have a big game this week, but we knew he wasn't going to have a big game this week. He was facing Pat Surtain. He'll be fine. Don't worry about Drake London. And I know Terry McLaurin killed you this week, but this guy has been great every game since week 2. You got to give him a pass here. It happens. But I don't think we can give Jayden Daniels a pass anymore. What is going on with Jayden Daniels the last 2 weeks? Sure, the rushing upside isn't there anymore like it was earlier, and a lot of people blaming the ribs, and I'm sure the ribs are a part of it, but look at the previous games with the rib injury. He ran a ton. He has faced 2 tough defenses, but what's really worrying me about Jayden Daniels is the throwing. On Thursday night, not even targeting the wide receivers or barely targeting the wide receivers. This doesn't look like the same offense we were seeing there for a while. So I think we got to at least be a little bit nervous about Jayden Daniels. I still think he's a guy you're mostly going to start. Like, I'm not going to start fringe guys over Jayden Daniels, but he's no longer a guy I have to consider a must start. And is it time to get a little nervous about Kyren Williams? Hasn't scored in 3 straight games, and his fantasy points in those games, 10, 11, and 8 PPR points. Not really what you were looking for from Kyren, and not what you've been getting all year from Kyren. But look, he's still the workhorse running back in this offense. He's still getting almost all the touches. Aside from this week, he's been fairly involved as a pass catcher. This is one of those weird games where they were just throwing touchdowns every time they had the ball, it seemed like. I think Kyren will be okay. Not ready to freak out on Kyren Williams yet. Let's hope he can bounce back next week. And am I the only one worried about A.J. Brown right now? I don't feel like anybody is talking about this, but over the last 4 games, his best finish is wide receiver 17, and he's now going to have 3 games outside the top 30 wide receivers. And it's like everybody's like, A.J. Brown is awesome. Is he? I mean, look, I think A.J. Brown is an awesome player. Of course, he's definitely awesome, but this is not what we're looking for in fantasy here. The issue is Saquon Barkley running like a maniac. Jalen Hurts vulturing all the touchdowns. A.J. Brown has still been putting up like decent yards and decent receptions, but the touchdowns just aren't there. But you got to think that's going to change, and A.J. Brown will be okay. So sure, he hasn't been giving you what you want lately, but I think that's going to turn around here pretty soon. But I can't say that about Devonta Smith. I'm pretty sure everybody's realized he's been pretty bad recently. Barely 10 combined fantasy points over the last 2 games. Obviously, if A.J. Brown isn't going off, there's not going to be a lot here for Devonta Smith either. This is a guy I feel like I'm always a little too high on Devonta Smith. I always feel like, oh yeah, this guy is so good. And then it's like, yeah, he's okay. And that's probably what he's going to be rest of the season. He'll be okay. He'll still have some big games because he's Devonta Smith, but he'll probably also have some frustrating games as well. And just when it looked like Garrett Wilson was back to being a must start, paying off that first round draft pick, 5 straight good games in a row, 2 duds in a row. And why? Why Jets? Why are we throwing to Davante Adams so much? Over the last 2 games, Garrett Wilson, 14 targets, Davante Adams, 20 targets. Why are we giving dusty 32-year-old Davante Adams 20 targets when you have a wide receiver entering his prime who's as good as Garrett Wilson? They're going into the bye week this week. I really hope this coaching staff gets together and says, okay, we got to change something here. We got to get the ball to Garrett Wilson more. This guy is too good not to, but you got to be at least a little nervous heading into the bye week. And you definitely got to be nervous about Deebo Samuel. 5 catches, 26 yards today, and for the second week in a row, Jauan Jennings not only outproduced him, but out-targeted him. 10 catches, 91 yards, a touchdown on 11 targets for Jauan Jennings. My biggest regret week 11 was not just being all in on Jennings and saying Jennings over Deebo because I felt like it's Deebo Samuel. I gotta say Deebo Samuel because his name's Deebo Samuel. No, forget all that. I don't care who's named Deebo Samuel and who's named Jauan Jennings. Jauan Jennings is the guy I want in my fantasy lineup, not Deebo Samuel. Look, Deebo Samuel will be fine. Like, he's not a complete dud here or anything, but if you want the 49ers wide receiver 1, I think it's Jauan Jennings. He's in an incredible role in this offense. I think Deebo Samuel is just going to kind of be okay rest of the season with 1 or 2 boom games, of course. And Aaron Jones, one of these players that just feels like he's been so good this year, and then you look and you're like, where are the fantasy points for this guy? Sure, this week he wasn't good in real life, but most weeks he's been good in real life. Just the production isn't there for fantasy, and it's the lack of the touchdowns. And I can't really explain why it's the lack of the touchdowns. I don't watch every Vikings play, every Vikings game, so I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if they're just throwing the ball a lot around the red zone. Maybe he's just getting unlucky with touchdowns. I'll have to dive into the stats when I have some time. But whatever the case, it's not helping you if you have Aaron Jones. It feels like Aaron Jones should be having a great fantasy season, and instead, he's just kind of been meh. And Jayden Reed's kind of the opposite of Aaron Jones. Like, I feel like I never hear about Jayden Reed. Like, he's one of these guys I feel like, yeah, Jayden Reed, he's a good player. He's good for fantasy. But then it's like, did Jayden Reed even do anything today? He did a little something today. He had 2 catches for 23 yards. Saved his day with a touchdown. But I feel like this is another guy kind of like Deebo Samuel. Like, his name value is more than his actual fantasy production, than what you actually get from this guy this year. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Green Bay. You never know who it's going to be. This week it was Christian Watson. Next week it might be Romeo Doubs. I'm sure there will be some weeks where it's Jayden Reed. But man, this guy is just a headache for fantasy that is really difficult to figure out week to week. And after looking like he was back to being a top-tier tight end, like a no-doubt set-and-forget tight end, Travis Kelce laid a complete egg against the Bills. But like, this Bills defense did a really good job here against everybody except Xavier Worthy, of all people, for some reason. But Travis Kelce, I think, will be fine. I don't think there's anything to be worried about here. I know Noah Gray, which was even more frustrating, had the big game today. But this will correct itself. One of those weeks, I'm going to give Travis Kelce a pass here. And I'm also going to give DeAndre Hopkins a pass. I know it's been 2 games where it's not been very good for DeAndre Hopkins after having that really nice game 3 weeks ago. But he's also faced 2 very tough defenses. It will get better for DeAndre Hopkins. Better days are ahead for him. I'm not panicking here on D-Hop. I still think he's going to be one of those guys you're going to want for the stretch run, for the playoffs. So don't do anything crazy like rage drop DeAndre Hopkins. Better days are ahead. And I probably got a little too excited about TJ Hawkinson last week, saying like, oh, he's back, strong start. You got to start him at tight end because he kind of disappeared this week. 2 catches for 13 yards. Not what we're looking for from TJ Hawkinson. I think sometimes even for myself, we got to remember this guy is coming off a major knee injury. Sure, he'll have those games like he had last week, but he'll probably have games like he had this week as well because he's coming back from a major knee injury. So TJ Hawkinson, you're probably still starting him at tight end. You're not, going to bench him or anything. But maybe last week's TJ Hawkinson isn't the guy we're going to see every single week. And Mark Andrews went back to being second fiddle behind Isaiah Likely this week. Isaiah Likely with a nice game, not like a huge game, but Mark Andrews basically disappeared. This game was almost invisible. He had like a couple catches, but nothing major for your fantasy team. I think 4 fantasy points. Ask me how I know. I drafted Mark Andrews in one too many leagues, and that was 1 league. But this is going to be a little bit worrisome if we're going to start to see Isaiah Likely get back involved a little bit again. So I'm a little nervous for Mark Andrews here. I think you're probably still starting him generally next week. And this was a tough matchup against the Steelers. He's never really had good games against them, but a little worried about Isaiah Likely right now. And then I just want to finish by saying last week I said I was completely done with Jalen Waddle. That's it. He's a bust. I'm done. But if for some reason you were still holding out hope for Jalen Waddle, ship has sailed. This is a lost season for Jalen Waddle. He's going to go down as one of the biggest busts of 2024 fantasy football. Please don't start Jalen Waddle the rest of the season.